You are now watching Maine Wire TV with your host, Tom Shattuck, featuring Maine Wire Editor-in-Chief Steve Robinson and the indispensable John Featherston.
And special guest David Trahan of the Sportsman Alliance of Maine, Steve Robinson, as usual, of the Robinson Report, John Featherston of the Maine Wire. I'm Tom Shattuck of the Maine Wire. Let's get right to it, Steve. A bit of reporting you did on ballot question number 2 from November, which has imposed red flag laws on Maine. Now we're starting to see what that could mean at somebody's front door.
Yeah, well, I mean, the top level is Democrats, far left progressives, standing on the bodies of shooting victims to pass legislation that they've wanted to pass for 30 years, gun control laws. Our yellow flag law failed to prevent the Lewiston mass shooting. The progressives weren't very interested in making sure that the money raised in the names of those victims was used appropriately. They pilfered that and handed it off to Somali charities, but they were interested in running a more stringent gun control referendum, the red flag law. And now this week we saw in the Transportation Committee, the Maine State Police, who opposed the red flag law, which is fairly extraordinary for the Maine State Police to come out and actually testify against a piece of legislation. There was, I think it was Lieutenant Michael Johnston delivered 45 minutes of powerhouse testimony about why the red flag law was dangerous for Mainers, dangerous for law enforcement, and corrosive of due process. He was ignored. They cast that by the wayside. And now that the Maine State Police are tasked with implementing this new red flag law, which will allow the state to come into your home and seize your firearms, even though you haven't been charged or convicted of any crime, they're doing what they have to implement it. And they have now, there's a bill coming forward, or I guess a request that the state police have made to fund a new army of SWAT teams. So right now, Democrats in Augusta, the same people who used to talk about the militarization of the police, are contemplating the creation of state-funded militarized SWAT teams who are going to break into the homes of people and steal their firearms, even though they haven't been charged with a crime or convicted, or this is just the red flag process. This is what they feel like they need for protection and armaments in order to enforce the red flag law that passed by popular referendum. And so David Trahan, longtime lawmaker and head of the Maine Sportsman's Alliance, who led part of the opposition to question 2, is going to tell us if I've overstated what's happening here with my description of the dynamic between the Maine State Police and the state lawmakers.
No, I don't. I mean, I wouldn't have used the same language you did, but you framed it up well. The Department of Public Safety, the governor's office, pretty much all of the largest law enforcement agencies in the state, the Fraternal Order of Police, all said, I know because they were right alongside me when I was debating Michael Johnston on statewide TV. Kept saying that if we pass this referendum, it will make it more dangerous. Excuse my staff, would make it more dangerous for police officers, those individuals being red flagged, family members. The law was dangerous from the beginning. We kept stressing it. Like you said, Steve, the department, Michael Johnston gave amazing testimony, which, by the way, the Democrats on Judiciary tried to block that public hearing, if you remember. And I had to put intense political pressure on that committee to hear his testimony. They didn't want to hear it. So here we are, March 5th, the commissioner of the Department of Public Safety, Mike Sawchuk, testifies that he wants 5 new officers and all of their equipment. I don't know if they call them attack vehicles or what the heck they call them, but all the equipment, transportation for a SWAT team. And when questioned on it, he says to implement the extreme risk protection order process. That's very disturbing to me, but it also reinforces what the experienced law enforcement agencies have been saying. That is, you just made it far more dangerous for everyone. You're not going to achieve your goals. We have a law that's already effective. It's very, very frustrating to me because I kept saying, and I said to a former Department of Public Safety Commissioner, Ann Jordan, during the debates, that this was going to make it more dangerous. And she owns it because she was advocating for it. And that frustrates me because she was working for a gun control organization, advocating as a former commissioner, and that was a conflict of interest. Anyway, what this means is when these red flag orders are issued, instead of it being a compassionate system in which law enforcement calms the situation and helps a person, now it's going to be a police officer, and likely a team, shows up at your door without your knowledge and says, somebody's petitioned the court saying you're dangerous, using what's called good cause. And when I asked a retired Border Patrol agent what that meant, is he said, and I quote, anything I want it to be. That's the standard that will be used to come and get your guns without your knowledge. And police officers know that that's going to be dangerous. If that individual says, get the hell out of my yard, slams the door in their face, what's the next thing they do? They call in a team. We got to go get his guns. We're under court order to do it. Oh. And that's the situation that we're going to see now. And this scares the daylights out of me, this proposal from the commissioner.
So I just want to get a clearer understanding of when exactly the red flag law can be used. So I'll just throw out a hypothetical. Yeah. Say you have someone who is really angry in public. They're making angry pronouncements about public officials, accusing Susan Collins of murdering their friends. They have a Nazi tattoo on their chest, and there's photographs on the internet of them training political extremist groups how to take sniper shots from a prone position at human-shaped targets. And again, very, very angry. Would that qualify for a red flag extreme risk protection order? Could I request that?
There are certain circumstances. If the individual petitioning says that Uncle Joe threatened me, Uncle Joe said he's going to get a gun, or Uncle Joe's going to commit suicide, it's basically their word on an affidavit that triggers the process. So officer says, well, go to the court and file a red flag order. They go to the court, they sign the affidavit, the judge looks at it, signs off and says, send the team to go get his guns. That's how simple it is. That's why the gun control people love it. It's all about taking guns away. It creates this image that every gun owner who's been accused, which by the way, half of these are thrown out around the country because they're inappropriate orders, is that any gun owner out there is dangerous until proven otherwise. That's what this is about. It's not a red flag, it's a scarlet letter. That's what they're trying to do to gun owners. And that's the part that frustrates me the most. They're using the police, the people who should be diffusing the situation, to throw gasoline on the situation. And I know that the police I speak with want nothing to do with this, and they know how dangerous it is.
David, is the thought here that in the case of suicides, that somebody is bent on shooting themselves, is the thought here that, having the courts send somebody over there is going to make somebody less suicidal? Or is...
Yeah, that's a misnomer. It's a falsehood. Maine's existing yellow flag law, I hate the word yellow flag. It's really not. It's just a name that the press has given it. It's been used over 1,350 times, mostly in suicide circumstances in which a person is put into protective custody, protect them and their family members and the public when they're suffering a mental health crisis. That law is working extremely well. Do you hear the need for SWAT teams to go out to conduct yellow flags? No, you don't. Because that situation is contained and the goal is to get them help. Now what the theory is with red flag is, okay, somebody's made a complaint. We'll go to their house and take their guns away, and all of a sudden they won't commit suicide with a rope, a car, fire, jump out a building, and all the other ways that people commit suicide. All this is about guns and labeling people.
Yeah, and I think also that the yellow flag law was underused prior to the Lewiston mass shooting. And after
Correct.
that happened, you looked at the facts and the circumstances. Of course, the Bangor Daily News initially reported that the yellow flag law wouldn't have applied. They were wrong. That was fake news. That was a lie. They had to correct that. And this very much was a case. It was a classic case where yellow flag should have been used. And I'm using the term just because it's a shorthand for what people understand. But it was a process that very easily could have been used if any of the people in Robert Card's Army unit had, been listened to, if the reports had been followed up on. There were so many indicators that this was a troubled individual. This was a failure to enforce existing law, not a failure to have another law on the books to begin with. And then after the Lewiston mass shooting, when more awareness was created around the yellow flag provision, the use of it went way up, and there was no the deadly conflict. It was used effectively without SWAT teams. So they came proposing a solution for a problem that had really already been solved just by effective enforcement of an existing law. And now they're making it all the more likely that we're going to have, modern Ruby Ridge. This is what I'm afraid of, is that you're going to have, another COVID era case with some, petty tyrant governor who wants to lock everything down, and some conservative activists, they get the police sicked on them. And then you're going to have, dead people in their own homes who have never been charged or convicted of a crime, killed by the police. Where's the ACLU on this? Where is the? I thought the ACLU used to be, defenders of individual liberty, civil liberties. They used to oppose the militarization of the police.
Amen. I want to point out that if your listeners don't want to believe what you just said, after the Lewiston shooting, there was a commission formed that the governor directed. Chief Justice Wathen managed that whole committee, former Chief Justice. And in the report, he stated himself that the yellow flag law could have and should have been used. That's not our words, that's a Chief Justice. No, this was a political effort by an out-of-state group who has never got their way. They wanted to use the Lewiston tragedy to get something passed. Well, they got something passed. Well, now it's going to make it more dangerous for everyone who's out engaged in that system. The police, the person red flagged. And if you don't believe me, Google Maryland man killed while getting red flag order. This exact scenario played out in Maryland. They tried to issue a red flag, came into the guy's home without his knowledge, said, "We're here to take your guns." There was a gun close by, he reached for it, and police officers killed him. That's what happened in Maryland. And this is my frustration, is that this out-of-state group didn't care that it made it more dangerous for anyone. They just wanted a gun control law.
Yeah.
Ironically, the police are saying don't use red flag, use yellow flag.
Talking to David Trahan of the Sportsman Alliance of Maine. David, I want to ask you, just, is it that the anti-gun people, and you said that it's a national thing, they're doing this in every state, the anti-gun people, they don't understand hunters, they don't understand guns, they think they're icky, they don't understand, they think you're a yahoo if you're somebody who uses the gun. These people are elitists and they're progressives. Do you think they don't realize, or they don't care, that the entire reason we have a Second Amendment is to stave off tyranny? And so when you send armed law enforcement to take the guns, this is the absolute origin of why we have the Second Amendment. So they are setting up both sides of a confrontation. Do they not care? They know, and they're fine with that.
My belief is that they made a decision that guns were inherently evil in the hands of anyone, and that they're a device that should be banned from human ownership. If you just look at, as you know, progressives are making a major move in this country right now. Look at American Socialist Party's platform on firearms. Yes, they believe that we ought to have arsenals. And if you want to go hunting, you have to check your gun out and bring it back at the end of the day. Look, any one of you can look it up online. The American Socialist Party wants no firearms whatsoever. They don't even want the police to have firearms.
Yeah.
Now that's bizarre. But anyway, that is somebody's been smoking too much pot who came up with that platform. The issue here is that the gun control community needs to make inroads in states like Maine, where ownership, there's high firearm ownership, where I think the safest state in the nation to live. It doesn't matter to them. They just need wins. And in Maine, because we're so small, they can overwhelm us with their financial resources, basically con the Maine people into believing something because they own the airwaves. They spent over $1 million.
That's been the truth going back to the 1980s with Maine Yankee. Maine is a cheap date with 3 media markets. You spend a couple $1 million, you get your policy passed. Then you go to other states and say, oh, we already did it in Maine. So Maine's being abused to serve an agenda that is not in Mainers' best interest, not driven by Mainers at all. And, you know, I know that the Department of Public Safety Commissioner Mike Sauschuk is going to say, oh, I'm just following orders here. You know, I just got to do what it takes to make my guys safe. But what about the Dominican criminal organizations that are, have firing with assault rifles at Rumford police officers, you know, during routine traffic stops and are selling fentanyl into all of our communities? What about the Chinese organizations that are trafficking cannabis and human trafficking throughout the state of Maine? What about any of these organizations? Where's the SWAT team to go after transnational criminal organizations? No SWAT teams for them. SWAT teams for Uncle Joe, who just happens to have a revolver, sitting on
dangerous
his counter
circumstances
because,
that Mainers.
Maybe he got a little tweaked during Vietnam.
Yeah, well, some of these very, very dangerous situations in which people are engaged, your first approach is to diffuse the situation. When you send a SWAT team and you look out in the yard and there's SWAT vehicles and there's armed men there, do you think that's going to decelerate or reduce the tension in the circumstance? Absolutely not. This is about getting up in your face, labeling law-abiding gun owners everywhere that at any given time you can be dangerous because you own guns. Now that to me is discriminatory. It's anti-Second Amendment. It was always meant to put a scarlet letter on gun owners. If you look at around the country how effective red flag orders are, even with much higher due process standards, the courts reject them at a rate of about 50%. And that's because people use these orders nefariously. Hey, I just broke up with Joe. I know he hunts. And you know what? I want to go get his guns. And that happens every week in Maine. Protection from abuse orders, according to police, are abused. They're used to punish people in relationships that don't work out. And it's very, very messy. Well, now you've just come up with a whole new mechanism to be abused. And the proof is in what's going on in other states. It absolutely is. But now we have, if the Transportation Committee approves, a whole new SWAT team that will be used to come up to a person's door without their knowledge, knock on it, and say, we're here to take your guns. And that's scary. It's disturbing. And the worst part is it was always unnecessary, but they shoved it down our throats anyway.
Well, David, I grew up in the Midwest, and in the late 70s and early 80s, I was in high school, and we used to bring our guns to school. And I know when I say that to people now, they're like, "What are you talking about?" We were taught to respect our guns, respect our elders, and respect our rules, and we were taught to respect firearms. What has changed, 40, 50 years later that, we're supposed to be a more advanced society and we seem to be less advanced. So what's changed and what do we need to do to change the narrative again?
Well, if you remember, and you can also Google this, you can search it. Michael Bloomberg, when he was, mayor of New York, he said that he was going to use his vast wealth to go after Democrats who were pro-gun. And he followed through on his promise. He purged the Democrat Party of pro-Second Amendment legislators. Now it's pretty much, if you're a Democrat, you're pro-gun control. If you're Republican, you're pro-Second Amendment. And, you know, there might be a few people left, but he accomplished his goal. He created all these splinter groups to work in the states to take guns away from people. That's when it started. And he's achieved much of his goal. He used money to convince American people to give up their right to own firearms. And that's happened. What I hear that's incredibly disturbing is how successful they have been in other states, Virginia, New York, California, even New Mexico's now caving under gun control regulation. It was much like the tobacco industry. When people decided that tobacco was evil, they started destroying the tobacco industry, and the same thing's going on with firearms right now. And I really don't think that an armed standoff in Maine really matters to Michael Bloomberg and crew. They just want your guns, and they'll do it in any manner they can get them.
Yeah, I think in a day where they're suing gun companies out of business for shootings that are done by human beings and not inanimate objects, that they're never going to stop their push. So what's the next step in Maine? Is it legislation? Is it a governor who's a Republican?
Well, I'll tell you what my belief is. Right now, the Supreme Court is the last line of defense. Our organization initiated the court challenge to the 72-hour waiting period. We were later joined by the gun owners of Maine, and that is now in its I think fourth layer of the courts. I see the courts as our last line of defense, and it's partly why progressive groups that support gun control want to stack the court. They want to change the court. I see that Plattner just came out and wants reform to the courts, term limits for Supreme Court justices. Well, of course he does.
Yeah,
that is fresh meat to the progressives who want your guns. They want to change the dynamic of the court so they can redefine your freedoms. And to me, that's incredibly disturbing that we're going to go down that road. But that's where we are. Some of these states now own the legislatures. They can do whatever they want. And we have to change our tactics to create and reserve funds for court challenges. I expect the red flag to end up in court. When it gets used, it's still on the table. I have not forgotten that that's our last line of defense. And I can see this ending up at least in front of federal court and then maybe in the Supreme Court one day.
Has a red flag court case gone to the Supreme Court in any form?
I missed that. I didn't hear what you said.
Has a red flag, as far as you know, has any red flag court case made its way to the Supreme Court yet?
Not at this point. They're in the lower courts. I know that there's challenges around the country. Ours is unique, and I think it's more easily challenged because of the incredibly low due process standards they use throughout. I'll give you an example. They use good cause to initially take your firearms.
Yep.
But if you petition the court to get them back, they use clear and convincing evidence, a much, much higher standard. It's hypocrisy. They use one standard to take it away, virtually no standard, and they make it incredibly hard to get them back. That'll end up in front of the court one.
Let's hope it's just as we're wrapping up with David Trahan. David, thank you so much. If we don't see you here, this is a perfect time to say goodbye. He is David Trahan with the Sportsman Alliance of Maine. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. So that's it, Steve.
You're letting your Massachusetts show there. Trahan. Trooper Trahan.
Did I say Trahan?
You said Trahan. Trahan.
Because we have Lori Trahan in the
okay.
Yes.
It's just like it's Peabody and Peabody, Waltham and Waltham. Yeah.
I rolled the dice. You know, we'll take this up when I get to Calais, Maine, Steve. We'll take it up there.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, but so that's interesting that he says that the courts and the Supreme Court could be the deciding forum, because it's important we do this before the Democrats pack the court in about 3 years, which they're going to do.
Well, I mean, the legislature could always propose a bill rolling this back. They could always take the teeth out of it and go back to the successful yellow flag law that we had. I really doubt that you'd have the same amount of money coming in to protect this, and doing it by referendum ensured that you weren't going to have a lot of Democratic politicians in purple districts, rural districts, being forced to take an uncomfortable vote. But that also depends on having a conservative infrastructure in the state that can actually hold people accountable for casting those kinds of votes. So that could happen. But on the court challenge thing, a plaintiff needs to arise. That's a process that it's not as simple as challenging an unjust law. The circumstances need to arise to give someone the standing in order to challenge that law.
Well, can't we arise a circumstance like the Democrats do so well?
I told Trahan I'd volunteer to be red flagged, but he said that they'd probably try to kill me.
Oh, I see. That's right. They give all the license they need to go in and whack you. Yeah, we need to use the forced to bake a wedding cake for me strategy in every state here when it comes to these.
Actually, my proposal was someone initiate a red flag on Ayman Osman for threatening John Featherston. I mean, the guy's been charged twice with 2 gun-related crimes, and he's reported a stolen firearm to the Lewiston police. Yesterday, he was involved in threats against John here. I think it's pretty dangerous to me, but have the red flag on him and then make him your plaintiff to overturn the gun control law. Rally together, rally America together for Ayman Osman's right to own firearms.
Well, I love it. He can't be carrying still, can he?
He had a gun. He had a gun stolen from his car when he was under indictment. Yeah.
No, his right to bear arms has not been infringed. No.
Amazing. Yeah, it's such a filthy and dangerous thing. I got to be honest. When I first heard about red flag laws about 15 years ago, at first it's a reasonable sounding suggestion. If you've got a psycho like Adam Lanza, you should probably keep him away from guns. So it's on a single level, a quick glance look. It's a good discussion. It's a good topic. And that's as far as progressives are going to go. They're going to go as far as NPR tells them as far as Maine public tells them to go. So unfortunately, it's a good explainer for them. And like David was saying.
Nope, looks like we might have lost Mr. Shattuck. But I think that's exactly right what he was saying, that there's so many of these policies that are just surface level deep that they sound good, but if you think about them for a moment and you think about the implementation, it's really going to be a problem for you. And the state trooper who testified against this, Michael Johnston, he was actually the Maine State Police trainer on the yellow flag law, and presumably will be the person who instructs law enforcement on how to implement the red flag law. So he's arguably the person who knows the most about yellow flag and red flag, how it's enforced, how it's carried out practically. He is the world leading expert, the state leading expert on how this policy works in the state of Maine, who explained to these Democratic lawmakers and to the entire state in detail why it was a bad idea for cops, why it was a bad idea for people who want to see less gun violence, why it was a bad idea for people who want to protect civil rights. He explained why it was a bad idea from all angles. And the people sitting there were totally immune to persuasion with facts. And I would like to note here that Troy Jackson, who, by the way, we recently surfaced a $1,000 lien taken out against him for non-payment of taxes that was sent to his Augusta address. Troy Jackson's son was paid $50,000 from a gun control group. And suddenly Troy Jackson, 20-year fan of the Second Amendment, pivots and supports the gun control referendum. What a shocking coincidence that is. But the the facts didn't persuade them. It was the money and the surface level argument convinced people. Yep, this sounds like a good idea. Take the guns away from the bad people. Keep us safe, government. But remember, I mean, Tom, you have to appreciate the irony of this. The same people who are, passing laws to kick ICE out of the state, want to militarize the state police and empower them to take away your guns. So they're simultaneously saying that the police are subhuman, evil, vile, racist Nazis who are out to, put their jackboots on our throats. And also, we want them to be the only ones who have guns.
Yeah, no, it's so hypocritical. It's disgusting, John.
Well, it's an extreme example, but when I was a selectman, I had a police officer come to my house and threaten me because I was standing up to him in the union. And the town council and the police chief decided that they were going to suspend the police officer and they were going to go to his house and take his gun because, he was under stress. Well, the police department didn't want to go to the police officer's house and take his gun. The state police didn't want to go to his house and take his gun because you have a disgruntled cop who's going to lose his job. You're going to take his gun. So, what do you do in a situation like David was saying? What are you going to do? Have a standoff or something like that? I mean, you're going to bring force and it's never going to work out well. And it's just, what were they thinking? I mean,
yeah, and we talked to years ago in Massachusetts, we talked to a bunch of sheriffs, and this is when this is first being proposed, and law enforcement people who said that, many of them suggest, especially women who are in the recipients of abuse, the law enforcement suggests that they get protection, that they protect themselves. And if with training, that can mean having a firearm. And they said that it's a matter of routine that the abusers would do whatever they could to get rid of the firearm in the house, and that this would be a great tool for them. And no doubt it is. Of course you would. If you were some psycho abuser boyfriend and, you knew that the only the impeding thing was her firearm, just make her helpless. It's so antithetical to the freaking DNA of the country. That's what's so angering about this. Like, but Joe Biden used to walk around saying, why do you need to have a big long gun? The deer aren't wearing Kevlar, as if this is about hunting. This is about fundamental self-protection in a world where nobody's a king here. The citizenry is as big as and important as the nobility. So that's why it's so freaking un-American, Steve. Like, we can't live this is not the world that was created by the Constitution.
No, and I think that we witnessed total failure by conservatives in the state of Maine to make a persuasive case. How often do you have Republicans and the Mills administration actually on the same side of a referendum, but still you lose? The Mills administration, I mean, the fact that the Maine State Police came out and gave the testimony that they did was a sign that the Mills administration opposed this. And Governor Mills herself has been very reluctant to embrace gun control, even as she's gone like extreme far left, wacko progressive on the ICE rules, transgenderism, fourth trimester abortion. She's just like, she'll take all of that. She was still sticking to some semblance of respecting sportsman's culture and the Second Amendment. And Republicans still weren't able to defeat the referendum. And part of it was, I think, collateral damage from the botched voter ID effort. The voter ID proposal was terribly written. They packed on a bunch of other changes that allowed Secretary Bellows and the far left to make it all about changes to absentee ballots, which should be reformed, but this wasn't the right strategic, smart, intelligent way to do it. And it resulted in a lot of money on the right walking away from a voter turnout effort. And so just again, the conservatives misplayed their cards and then got dispirited and people stayed home. If you cranked up like Christian voter turnout by 15 or 20% in the state of Maine, or even just conservative right of center vote turnout, then you don't have this red flag law. And that's unfortunately the mechanism just isn't there. The spirit isn't there. I think a lot of conservatives have been, beaten down into submission, or they've just left the state, frankly.
David, when they started to, in New York, reimagine policing and get the cops out of the subways and try to make sure the cops were not engaging with criminals, unless violent crime was in the midst of happening, New York changed over a couple of years. People are being lit on fire in the subways. People are being pushed into the subways almost routinely. Now we've seen what's been happening in New York. So if we could look down the road here in a couple of years of red flag laws, what's the nightmare scenario that we might see unfold?
Well, you think about what they've created for a potential situation. They send the SWAT team in. An individual defends themselves because they believe that they've done nothing wrong. They're scared. There's an encounter and someone's killed. Well, guess what happens then? The same progressives come in and say, well, we need to disarm the police. We need to send mental health workers to deal with these individuals. They created the environment in which this violence occurs, death occurs, and then they use it for political advantage. No, this is one of those things that and I'll tell you, when I spoke with my board about whether we would spearhead the opposition to question 2, what I said to the board was, no organization worth its salt walks away simply because you might lose. You stand by your convictions, you fight this, and if you lose, you lose. But that's not the end of the fight. The courts are the place where this will be resolved. This is a dangerous policy driven by a special interest group. They use the tragedy in Lewiston as a catalyst to get it passed. And Steve's right. The other referendum we knew was a huge uphill battle. But we still had to fight this because, unlike most policies, if the other side is wrong, people are going to die.
Yeah.
So I wonder, will there be any implications of this gun control fight for the 2nd Congressional District?
To fight this
election?
As long as we can.
Oh, sorry, David, I don't know if you heard me, but I was wondering, do we know where State Auditor Matt Dunlap and State Senator Joe Baldacci came down on the red flag law? Did they make any pronouncements in support of it? Were there any votes that Joe Baldacci cast?
Informational forums. So Baldacci was strongly opposed. Matt made some comments that concerned me. He seemed a little squishy on it. I think eventually he did come out in opposition. He held my job prior to me being director.
Yeah.
So good luck with that community if you want to get elected. I think what will happen though, and you can't have a position be pro-life and be a Democrat anymore. We learned that in Waterville. Representative White got purged by Planned Parenthood when he went against the party. The same is true now of the Second Amendment. If, Bloomberg hasn't given up. If you're a Democrat, pro-Second Amendment Democrat, you're going to get targeted and they're going to get pushed out of the party. And that's just the reality.
David.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for your time.
Sure.
I'm a flatlander down here in Massachusetts, so I don't know how to say your name correctly. I've said it wrong 3 times. Robinson taking me to task for it. How do I say your last name?
Trahan. David Trahan.
This is a piece of Maine politics lore that goes way back. I don't know, David, if you were actually the inspiration for Trooper Trahan in the only positive thing that Andy O'Brien has contributed to the state of Maine, O-Chang Comics, Temp Tales. You got to look up Green Bud Kelly and O-Chang Comics. This was back when the AFL-CIO communications director Andy O'Brien actually had a sense of humor. He managed to make some funny Maine cartoons. But it's been a long time since he's done anything that great.
I'll tell you a really funny, cute story real quick, and then I've got to go. I got another meeting. I got an invitation to go smelting with a couple of friends, and they brought their kids with them. I showed up at Worthing smelt camps, and when I get out of the vehicle, I heard these little voices, 8 to 10 years old, in unison saying, "Trooper Trahan, Trooper Trahan." Oh yes, it's legendary.
Well,
hey, thanks, guys.
Thank you very much for being with us, David.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it reminds me of now that he talks about Worthing smelt camps. The great thing about, I don't know if you've ever been smelting, Tom, but the great thing about smelting is at Worthing's is that Sun Sun, one of the best Chinese food restaurants in the state of Maine, in Randolph, Maine, on the other side of the Kennebec from Augusta, they used to deliver right to your shack out on the ice. You could tell them, I'm in Worthing's, Shack 19, and they would bring a poo-poo for $6 right to your shack in the middle of the night. You know, when you're, blistering drunk with all your buddies, somebody just shows up with a whole bunch of chicken fingers and teriyaki on a stick. Unfortunately, sadly, sign of the times, Sun Sun, no longer in business. And I have it on good authority that the people who were involved in that particular enterprise found a more lucrative endeavor. You can use your imagination as to the blossoming, blooming enterprise that they're now involved in.
I can imagine. Well, Steve, of course I've been smelting, which is obviously the process of extracting a metal from its from heating, chemically reducing it.
Yes. Yes.
So there you go. But
John, how's your day in Portland going?
Well, I think you just saw an open air drug deal here live on Maine Wire TV. I mean, it's getting to be very concerning here on the corner of Forest Ave and Preble Street. I mean, what is going on in our country that we're allowing? Janet Mills tells us we don't have any fraud in our state. Well, I tell you, we got a lot of fraud in our human services division, because there's a lot of people here that need some help. And I've seen some disturbing things today in Portland, and we're supposed to take care of our most vulnerable. And what I'm seeing today here is, I don't know. I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy with it. So
yeah.
I've seen a lot of crime. I've seen a lot of open air drug use. I've seen a lot of urination and feces on the street, and people living in bus shelters. And kudos to the Portland police. I've seen the Portland police do a lot of good community policing here today, and kudos to them. But where are our priorities in this state? We have massive fraud in our state, and we can't take care of our people. What is going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the same thing that you're seeing in California, right? There's in California, you're talking about billions. In Maine, you're talking about tens of millions. But the amount of money flowing into the organizations that are tasked with, fighting drug addiction and the drug epidemic in a humane way, the money just keeps going up. The organizations that are supposed to combat homelessness, the money just keeps going up and up and up forever, at the state level, at the city level, at the national level. But the problem just seems to get worse. So you have to wonder who's making all the money? Who's making all the money on these needle exchanges? Who's making money on all the Suboxone and all of the methadone, all of these needles that are being handed out? Where is all that money going? Because it's quite obviously not effectively, achieving the goal that they purport it's going to achieve.
And John, you talked about, what you're surrounded by, all the feces and the people doing open air drug things and all the degradation around you. And like we talk about this almost every single day, that progressives in Augusta seem to be fine with this. The experiment is working. And sure,
give them more needles. Give them more needles. Yeah,
exactly. So, it comes from such a dark place and such a dark ideology, really. And we're talking about gun violence today. The Democrats in the Maine Senate today voted down a measure that would have just simply appreciated Charlie Kirk, who was a man of peace and a man of God. And the same body was happy to honor George Floyd, who was a guy who over 20 years had a whole bunch of arrests, convictions, violent criminal convictions. And what people saw with Charlie Kirk was probably the most brutal assassination, snuffing out of a human being that at least two generations of people have ever seen. It was so violent and so awful. And whatever you feel about the guy, he was a man of peace with a family, and we can't give this guy a nod in the Senate. Like, F you.
Look there at Joe Baldacci. Joe Baldacci wants to be the congressman for the 2nd District of Maine and can't stand up to his own party and take a vote in favor of Charlie Kirk. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand it. I mean, they were even whipping votes against this. You know, Matt Harrington, the assistant minority leader, posted something on Facebook where the Democrats made a mistake. They said they have pages that send notes around, and the page dropped the note to the wrong senator, and it showed that Jill Doosan, senator from Cumberland, actually was whipping to people, I guess, counting votes against this resolution. They're indefinitely postponing just a simple resolution. And these are things, by the way, that just sail through. Like the George Floyd one was a voice vote. It's just like they pass by acclamation. They're non-controversial. These are things that have no real consequence other than expressing the sentiment of the legislature. I'll even say that the legislature gave me a sentiment.
Yes.
Oh,
I was there.
Charlie
I was there.
Kirk, I'm way worse than Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was an impressive human being and a man of God and a family man. He did way more for this country. He did way more for this state than I did. They gave me one. But they can't just do this for Charlie Kirk?
Yeah, well, doesn't it just... Go ahead, John.
Senator Husson's, Steve, remind everybody who her son is.
Well, yes, that's true. Senator Doosan's son is Nathan Davis, who has now taken over the reins of Gateway Community Services. He was running the nonprofit arm of it, which has recently received $400,000 from the opioid settlement money that Aaron Fry controls. But Nathan Davis ran that nonprofit arm and is now taken over the for-profit arm, which I don't know if you can call it a for-profit when all of your Medicaid money has been shut off amid a House oversight investigation, an HSI investigation, a DOJ investigation, and maybe some kind of fake state investigation that the Department of Health and Human Services will claim to be running. But yeah, so I mean, this is a senator, a figure who is deeply connected to the Democratic Party, the machine here. And hasn't found it in her heart to condemn the Medicaid fraud allegations, very credible Medicaid fraud allegations leveled against the business that her son is associated with, but is rallying Democrat senators to block just a simple resolution for Charlie Kirk. I don't get it. I mean, it speaks to their mentality, but also how little they think of conservative voters. Like, there were massive rallies and vigils across the state when Charlie Kirk was brutally slain. He was the greatest civil rights leader, in my opinion, of our time, and he was brutally murdered for speaking his mind and for proclaiming the gospel of Christ. And that was why he was killed. And these Democrats can't even just say, you know what, this would be meaningful to people, even though I disagree with them. And support it. They're going to say no. Screw this guy and his ugly biblical beliefs. Well, I mean, what do you think's going on? What kind of beliefs do you think are being taught at the mosque in Mears in Lewiston? You guys are so supportive of the Somali community. You know what the Islam preaches about traditional family values and homosexuality.
No, it doesn't matter, Steve. The people at the LGBTQIA plus rallies want a free Palestine. So, I mean...
Yeah, I want Graham to print us up "I'm gay for Hamas" T-shirts. I think those would sell for the next time there's a pro-terrorism rally in Portland. I mean, we're only a little ways away from it. Although I guess it would work because we're going to see the pro-Iranian, pro-Shiite extremist rallies pretty soon here. If the bombing campaign in Iran goes on much longer.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that this is how they feel about us. Those Democrats feel this is an endorsement of the murder of Charlie Kirk by those Democrats today. That's what this is. They're all for it. They think people like him should die. They think it's fine. And you're more conservative than him, Steve, and so am I probably. That's what they think of all of us. They think that our conservatism can no longer be tolerated in this country, and it's fine if it's shot to death. And to them, somehow The guy from the life insurance company also represented that too. So it's okay. He gets to die. He's now a punchline in late night talk shows. These people hate us, and it's not the same the other way. These people are absolutely out of their minds, which is another reason why, that they don't want ICE at the polling stations, because
I mean, the contradictions and the cognitive dissonance for the left right now that have been brought up just in our, brief Maine Wire TV program are remarkable. Like, they're trying to empower the state with SWAT teams to come take away your guns, to prevent gun violence, but they're simultaneously giving the blessing to gun violence against Charlie Kirk. And then they're, saying, well, we don't want police in our state cooperating with immigration authorities because they're bad police. The incoherence is remarkable. No wonder they're so angry all the time. The stress and the cognitive pain that it must cause to believe all those contradictory things at the same time is incredible.
Hey guys, can you explain one thing to me? Democrats tell me illegals don't vote. So why would you care if ICE was at the polls if there's going to be no illegals there? I mean, explain it to me like I'm a third grader, okay?
I'm glad you asked that, John, because I asked a progressive today why that was. That same question. He said because ICE are federal criminal troops who are going to be there because they don't just remember, they just wantonly kill random Americans, ICE. So they don't just go door to door. They prefer it to be brown and black people when they're going door to door. But they'll kill whites too. They'll kill poets and male nurses too. So they're happy to. And so Trump's going to station ICE troops at the polls to intimidate the male nurses and the lesbian poets, because ICE now, the left believes, just wantonly kills anybody they like the Nazis. And unfortunately, Steve, it's not fringe lefties who believe this. It's freaking mainstream. Like my neighbors, like your neighbors.
Well, maybe your neighbors, not my neighbors.
Yes,
I think that the Maine Wire store should sell T-shirts that say something like "I commend elections" with a big acronym, and then people can wear those along with maybe a green hat and just stand outside as observers at the polls, as is their right as free Americans, if they want to just kind of linger around wearing Maine Wire memorabilia. For me, this is Secretary Bellows is just saying the quiet part out loud. She's gone from attacking me and questioning my patriotism for reporting on non-citizen voting to saying out loud, yes, non-citizens are registered to vote, and no, I won't give the Justice Department the central voter registration file. Oh, no, actually, I didn't say what I said on video. That's a lie. I didn't say that. And now she's saying, well, but also I don't want ICE there. They're just blaring from the hilltops that they are rigging votes with non-citizens. They've admitted it. The Secretary of State is on video talking to a far left DC lawyer saying non-citizens are registered to vote and I don't want ICE at the polls. And by the way, I don't even know what prompted her to come out and say that. I don't think that this was ever something like an initiative. She's got the press eating out of her hand. All of these TV reporters know that she's, going to be pliable and she's worth quoting because she's the Secretary of State. She's willing to say something stupid and combative. I haven't seen a single TV news reporter with the courage or the journalistic convictions to ask her about admitting on camera that non-citizens are registered to vote in Maine, and then going in the legislature and lying and saying, no, they're not. And I haven't seen a single TV reporter in this state who has had the courage or the journalistic convictions to ask her about the Maryland company, AKA the DC area company, that somehow ended up with absentee ballots that are affidavit forms for Maine votes, for Maine absentee votes, those envelopes that just so happened to turn up in the DC area consulting firm. At the same time, 250 ballots, were in a Amazon package delivered to some woman's front door. I haven't seen any TV reporters asking about that, but they're more than happy to run over to the secretary when she, blurts out something stupid about protecting non-citizen voters.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope that the people of Maine realize that in other states, it's not normal that the Secretary of State remove protections from federal officers' vehicles. That's not a normal
Hey,
thing.
don't worry about it. She'll oversee her own election. Don't worry about it. Everything will
Yeah.
be fine. She'll just oversee her own election. So, guys, I had to move because the guy was doing a number 2 on the sidewalk about 3 feet away from me, and so I mean, what is going on here?
Did you hand him some dude? Did you hand him some dude wipes?
Oh, no.
I didn't have any on me right now, but holy cow!
Brett says I literally just passed John near Deering Oaks, and there was a guy smoking crack at the bus stop. That's wild.
That's true. That's true.
So, John, let me know if you run into Rafael Maripina, Yorman Uzgatel, or Yerman Para out there. ICE grabs Venezuelan banditos in Maine after ATM heist, multi-chase high-speed chase, multi-county high-speed chase. All the bang-bang action is in the Maine Wire. These guys had one hell of a day. Finally got gobbled up by ICE. But the paragraph that really brings it home to me is the last paragraph. If the alleged ATM banditos had been able to post bail under the new sanctuary state rules Governor Mills has approved, they could have been gone with the wind. Which is amazing. Amazing.
It's just true. This is a perfect example. This is a story that shows, exactly why the law enforcement was opposed to this bill, why it's such a dumb bill. I mean, these guys were going around jackpotting ATMs, ripping ATMs, stealing money from Maine banks and businesses. And I think they got $20,000 cash bail, which, if you're arrested for, taking a poop on Forest Ave in Portland, $20,000 might be hard for you to come up with. But if you've been going around jacking ATMs, you probably got the funds kicking around somewhere, stolen funds to pay your cash bail, and then you're gone. Scram. You're free and clear. We see it happen all the time in Massachusetts. There was just 3 Dominican fentanyl dealers arrested in Washington County who had previously been arrested in Massachusetts, but they were not allowed. The local police were not allowed to tell immigration authorities about it, so they cut them loose, and then they wind up surprised they're dealing drugs again in Washington County. That's what would have happened. That's what will happen in similar circumstances just a few months from now. When this legislative session adjourns, the piece of legislation that Janet Mills supported, that Democrats approved, will become law after 90 days. And then at that point, there will be a prohibition on law enforcement in Maine cooperating with federal immigration authorities. And right now, the state police are already voluntarily complying with this. And that includes for commercial truck drivers. So the state police not involved in this at all, by the way. This is a multi-state, high-speed chase with foreign ATM, burglars, and the state police, they have to stay away from it if they actually want these guys deported. It puts them in a very awful position. It ends up having to be the Augusta Police Department that's putting out the statement here, even though this crossed, into another county and multiple other towns.
So let me direct people for the Maine Wire today as well for this wonderful story about the Fishermen's Forum. Annual meeting of the state's fishermen had a special treat this year. Jordan Hudson, Maine native, who wore a fishing line dress. Steve, have you seen this dress?
Ooh, I have not seen the dress, but I know the Belichick bow of which you speak, because I think we covered her participation in a beauty pageant against a man.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, she is looking like $1 million. I am a Jordan Hudson fan. I'm
not hard to look at. No,
not at all. I'm also 40. I like a good 55-year difference in relationships. I hope when I hit my 70s, and once my wife files for divorce, which undoubtedly she will do, that I can make a Belichick-like transition like that. I'm on team Jordan. John, any problem with this relationship?
No. No, I have no problem with it. No, none at all. And I'll say anything more, I'll get in trouble. So no.
I gotta know. I want to know, Tom. How much money do you have to outkick your coverage like that? Like, what is the ratio? What is the ratio? Like, Tom, how much money are you gonna have to have sitting in your bank account when you're in your 70s, singles, and
Yeah.
I agree, divorced, inevitably divorced.
Yeah.
How much money do you need to be able to bag Jordan Hudson and have her as arm candy?
So right now I sit at 0. So I know it's more than my current net worth. I can tell you that. That is, I don't know how. I assume there's pay raises coming at the Maine Wire, so I'm going to need to be up around 400 million probably by the time.
Well, our collective net worth is tied up really in the sword of truth at the moment, and Graham tells me the sword of truth is basically like one of those. It's like not a shit coin, but what were those the digital images that they were selling for a little an NFT. It's a non-fungible token. It's appreciating in value wildly based on demand for it. So that's worth easily hundreds of millions at this point. So as soon as we find a way to sell that or take out a loan against it, like a fine piece of art, yes, raises all around for everybody at the Maine Wire. But I don't know. I still don't know if we can get you to 70-year-old dating Jordan Hudson level. I think there's an amount of. I don't think it's just purely money with Bill Belichick. I think there's a Riz element too, right? Like he's got some swagger that I think Jordan. I don't think she's purely a gold digger here.
No, although at this point I'm as effective a football coach as he is right now. Right.
This is true. Well, I bet Jordan would come on Maine Wire TV. I think we should reach out to and try and get Jordan. In fact, Matt, your assignment beginning tomorrow is to book Ms. Hudson to come on to the show.
There we go.
Well, Tom, right. I will say with all due respect, you married way up, buddy. So I mean,
that's true. You should be totally satisfied. Well, I would think.
Yeah,
I would think it'd just be easier to be. I think it would just be easier to be less divorceable than to accumulate the amount of money that you would need to bag a Hudson years from now.
Smart way, yeah. But no, my current spouse will snap out of this at some point, and there will be a cadre of attorneys separating me from my house. All right, John Featherston, who has
you got to plug Burn Barrel podcast now. If people want to know more about the drama in the Shattuck household, you got to sign up for the Burn Barrel Substack and the Burn Barrel podcast.
Yes, check out the Burn Barrel podcast. It is on Apple and Spotify and sometimes YouTube and it's all over the place. Alice Shattuck will be there tonight. And we'll talk about a lot of the same things we talk about here and some other stuff. We're really into AI these days, Steve. It's like this country is going to be, according to some people, unrecognizable in many ways in 3 months. It's like it has happened.
Yeah, the pace of acceleration is pretty quick. And you know what's weird is I think what's the guy's name? Stanley Kurzweil. He was an intellectual academic computer scientist. He predicted, I think, like 3 decades ago, that 2026 was going to be the year for artificial general intelligence, and looks to be pretty spot on. So I tend to be not a total doomer when it comes to the development of artificial intelligence and the large language models, but certainly a believer in how the upheaval that they're going to cause for society and how quickly the pace of change is going to be.
Yeah. My wife works for an email marketing firm that's growing. They've got seed money. People from Google work there, and they cleared about a year and a half ago anybody who wasn't a proficient prompter, just out already. Because where have you been if you haven't been prompting in saving time and money? And it's amazing. But we'll get to that. We'll talk about that in the Burn Barrel and more in the Maine Wire too.
I'll tell you, they're not going to be able to take AI and automate somebody like John Featherston, who can go down and watch somebody take a shit on the street in Portland. It's going to be a long while before the robots are able to do that.
Guys, just a real quick recap. I saw 4 drug deals, 1 guy take a dump, another guy take a leak. I saw 2 police cars go to the Big Apple store and talk to somebody. I don't even know where I am right now. I gotta go home and take a shower.
That is interesting. So, Steve, I wrote up the Charlie Kirk story for the website today, and I wrote this paragraph about, it's interesting. Actually, we had talked about this. It's interesting that the Senate thought it was fine to give a nod to George Floyd. Meanwhile, it wasn't okay to give it to Charlie Kirk. George Floyd has had a life full of crime. Charlie Kirk has a life full of this. And so I put it clunky. So I put it into ChatGPT. It did not want to work on that paragraph.
Yeah, it's funny.
Wow.
ChatGPT, it's for some reason that's one piece of artificial intelligence that it's got a blind spot there. It can't recognize, say, the level of fentanyl in George Floyd's bloodstream. When he was reported dead. Fortunately, though, I think that handicapped, woke, caged AI is not going to be the AI that wins ultimately. I think that the unrestricted AI is going to be far more effective. It will get into the wild. It will be open sourced. I think what you're seeing with OpenAI and to a certain extent Google trying to have these policed and controlled forms of artificial intelligence is making a marketable product so that they can offer them to healthcare companies, to law enforcement, to the federal government, and be able to say like, hey, this isn't going to go Skynet on you. This isn't going to be a HIPAA violation. This isn't going to be a defense attorney's wet dream. I think that that's what they're trying to do. But at the same time, they've got those safety standards enforced. I saw today that it was, I think the recent mass shooter in Canada used AI basically as a co-conspirator in the shooting plot. The OpenAI has disclosed that they had the chat history, and they even had at one point considered turning it over to law enforcement, but didn't. So I think there's going to be a lot of problems there. Also, don't use OpenAI like your attorney if you have done crimes, because none of that is protected by attorney-client privilege. That's another area where they're going to have to innovate some AI solutions, is find a way to get them covered by attorney-client privilege so that they're actually useful for the lawyers who like to use them.
Yeah, actually, it reminds me, we should write about why Palantir is the Defense Department of War. I mean, default AI now instead of what was the other one? The big one, I forgot what they're called. Quantus.
It was Claude, Anthropic.
Yes, Anthropic. Essentially demanded that it not be used on anything lethal. And the Department of Defense is like, "What, are you effing kidding me?" And so they were saying,
"Yeah." I mean, for me, that's a tough one for me. I think that's like a philosophical discussion, because I don't know that it was Anthropic saying that they don't want it used on anything lethal, or if it was that they didn't want it used on autonomous lethality, like an algorithm making a decision to kill somebody. I think that was the red line that they had. And, I'm kind of, I'm wondering, I've read my Asimov, I've seen the iRobot rendition with Will Smith, the 3 laws of robotics. Do we really want robots who are okay killing people? I tend to think maybe no. I've seen some Black Mirror too. Yeah, Skynet, Black Mirror. It's a fuzzy question, but fortunately, like with a lot of things, we're just going to hurl headlong off the cliff and hope it works out as a civilization. There's not going to be any real informed conversation about it.
The Manhattan Project is underway, and it doesn't matter. It's happening. All right. He is Steve Robinson of the Robinson Report. John Featherston, as usual. My name is Tom Shattuck. Join us every day at 4 p.m. right here on the Maine Wire Television.